The Battle of Waterloo was fought on June 18, 1815. The two great armies prepared to clash in the fields near Waterloo, a small village in modern-day Belgium. This was no ordinary battle. It would decide Europe's fate and end the ambitions of one of history's most famous leaders, Napoleon Bonaparte. After escaping exile on Elba, Napoleon returned to France earlier that year, rallying an army and seizing power again. Europe's great powers, determined to stop him, formed a coalition led by Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia. As Napoleon marched his forces into Belgium, he aimed to defeat the coalition armies before they could unite against him. An allied army led by Britain's Duke of Wellington was facing him at Waterloo. The British and their allies, a mix of Dutch, Belgian, and German troops, held a strong defensive position on a ridge. To the east, the Prussian army under General Blücher was on the move, trying to join the battle. Napoleon knew his only chance of victory was to destroy Wellington's army before the Prussians arrived. At 11:30 a.m., Napoleon launched his first attack, sending artillery fire across the battlefield. His goal was to weaken Wellington's center. Next, he sent his infantry to attack the fortified farmhouse of Hougoumont on the Allied right flank. The battle for Hougoumont raged for hours, but the British defenders held firm, repelling wave after wave of French troops. Meanwhile, Napoleon ordered an assault on the Allied center. Thousands of French soldiers charged up the ridge, but the Allied infantry stood their ground in squares, formations designed to resist cavalry. British cannons roared, mowing down the advancing French. Despite heavy losses, Wellington's lines held. By late afternoon, the sound of marching feet echoed in the distance. The Prussian army had arrived on Napoleon's right flank. Blücher's forces struck the exhausted French troops, forcing Napoleon to divert soldiers to meet this new threat. The French were now fighting on two fronts. Desperate to break the Allied lines, Napoleon sent his elite Imperial Guard into the fray. These were his most feared and experienced soldiers. The Guard marched up the ridge under heavy fire, but Wellington's troops, bolstered by reinforcements, unleashed a devastating counterattack. For the first time, the Imperial Guard faltered and retreated. As the French forces began to crumble, Wellington ordered to advance. Allied troops surged forward, pushing the French back. With the Prussians closing in, Napoleon's army was routed. By nightfall, the battlefield was littered with thousands of dead and wounded. The combined number of men killed or injured reached nearly 50,000, with close to 25,000 casualties on the French side and approximately 23,000 for the Allied army. Napoleon's dreams of an empire were shattered. Napoleon fled the battlefield and surrendered to the British weeks later. He was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena, where he would spend the rest of his life. The Battle of Waterloo War in Europe concluded a war that had raged for 23 years, ended French attempts to dominate Europe, and destroyed Napoleon's imperial power forever.